Welcome to the episode of the Level Design Podcast. In this episode, we investigate the arcane arts of campaign director Dana Nightingale. Let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome back to the Level Design Podcast. We are back after a tiny break, and we're now ready to get on with the new year. Joining me is, as always, well, apart from last time, I'm not going to mention why, is Valentina Chrysostomou. Welcome back, Valentina.
Thank you. You made it sound so mysterious. I was just feeling a bit under the weather. Everybody, don't worry, it's fine. Nothing mysterious.
Well, it wasn't that secret mission to...
It was a Spec Ops mission. I can't remember it. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, what have you been up to? Well, is this your first recording in the year of our Lord 2022?
Yeah, indeed, it's the first recording, and I've just been chilling and playing this multiplayer game called Hunt Showdown, and just been enjoying some downtime and learning new multiplayer games.
And that's the reason you weren't in the last episode, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to tell you about it.
Too much playing.
And also joining us is the lovely Johnny Wilson. Johnny, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I think, yeah, you said we're back in 2022 now after a bit of a break. But like I said, I think I'm almost at 100%, maybe at 90% this week. By next week, I'll be back at 100% operating on full capacity.
Where can you go from that? Like, it's the week after, it's going to be 110 and then 120.
You got to maintain it. That's it.
You got to maintain it. It's got to be that
it's
exponential increasing graph.
Don't go too far, because if you go to 110, 120, that's when you might start to kind of struggle a little bit.
Smoke out of the ears.
Yeah. And Rob McLachlan is also joining me on this week's episode. Hello, Rob. How are you, sir?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. It's good to be back. What have I been engaging myself in? So I've been playing a time-sucking strategy game called Anno 1800, which I've got back into, which is extremely bad for my evenings and doing anything else, but it's always enjoyable. And the other thing I've been doing is playing Game Maker Garage with my kids on the Nintendo Switch, which is a sort of Nintendo stab at the wonderful Dreams from Media Molecule. And it's not quite as magical or stunning, but it's a really solid little thing for making really fun games with my kids.
Yeah, those strategy games, man, they're always going to get you. I've had literally like, oh, it's dawn, playing.
Absolutely, just one more turn.
Yeah, one more turn. Oh my god! But I mean, at least you're training your kids in the magical arts of game design.
Well, indeed. In fact, they both profess the desire to become game designers as well. Despite my best efforts to, with my tired eyes.
Yeah, no influence at all. No influence at all.
I mean, if you encourage them, they might later turn out to be doctors or something. You know, so
maybe they'll rebel and become something incredibly worthwhile instead.
Yeah. I mean, it is a worthwhile cause, and in that.
Yes, we bring excitement and joy to millions of people worldwide.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And more importantly, and I don't mean to belittle my co-hosts, but we have our guest this week, which is the wonderful Dana Nightingale from Arkane, hence the cryptic clue in the title, in case you didn't guess. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's good to meet all of you.
Likewise, is Arkane's games like Prey, Dishonored, Deathloop, I think are the most talked about games in level design. I mean, they're talked about because they're fun games, etc. But I think when you start studying level design and looking into it, I think you can't but, you know, look into some of the levels that you've worked on, I've got to say. So I don't want to go too deep into like sort of Clockwork Mansion and a whole host of other levels that are, I think, the gold standard, if I have not said that already, of the craft. So having you here it makes us, as level designers, with my level design hat on, I have a level design hat somewhere around here, just off camera, that it's a pleasure to have you on the show. We can really get down and talk about that. But you've also now become, I'm going to guess this recently, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're now campaign manager at
Director.
Campaign director. Oh,
Yes.
even higher at Arkane, which is what a wonderful position to be in making some wonderful games. You know,
it is certainly it's a lot of responsibility. But it is it's, you know, I'm very excited to rise to the challenge and continue to make the studio proud. And you know, it just, you were singing praises before. I just want to make sure I take the chance to like say that it has been always a tremendous privilege to work with these level design teams in Arkane Lyon, which I've worked with for most of my career, and Arkane Austin back in Dishonored 1. You know, it like I always hope that what I do is elevating the entire team, and they're tremendous to work with. Like I'm always surprised, thinking how can it get better than this, and then we go ahead and make it better. They're delightful people to work with. So it's very nice to hear your compliments towards the work we do, and like I just want to give that back to the team.
Yeah, absolutely, and please don't take me congratulate. It's one way that I can talk to the rest of the team that's working in these things. But you didn't start out of nowhere. Was it working on Thief levels? Because that's another that's another high bar to set. Or mods, right?
Yes, to be clear, I never worked at Looking Glass or Iron Storm. I was a modder. I was making Thief mods. Yes, I got started in that right at the beginning, after Thief: The Dark Project was released. A couple of us banded together and pestered Looking Glass until they released their level editor.
Oh, really?
And yes, we did a little camp. We had our little online petition. I think it got something like, I don't know, 90 signatures or something. But you know, back in 1998 or whenever it was.
Yeah. But
that was half the internet then, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's half the internet.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. And,
you know, like nowadays you have like a petition.org or something like that, and anyone on their phone will sign it. But the fact that someone's emailing you like actual names, that's amazing. And how do you know, something that we cover a lot on the podcast, or comes up a lot, is how people get into the industry, quote unquote. And I'm going to, you know, there are some ways, but you didn't go like, were you studying? You weren't studying like game design or anything. You were studying.
I was studying architecture. Yeah.
Okay, that'll explain why the levels are pretty good, right? Because
a bit, yeah.
That's like that's playing on expert level, Dana. That's like
yeah. You can't surpass someone who knows architecture. It's you won the field.
It's like, but again, to clarify, I got a degree in architecture, but I was never an architect. I had the pleasure of graduating, I think it was 2008, which was like the height of the recession at the time, and just the whole housing market crashed. There was no work for architects, so time to go back to plan A, which was, you know, I always wanted to work on video games. Maybe there's still work there, and a couple of years later, I managed to find it.
Oh, well, that's amazing. And this was at Arkane. This was the first place that you started at.
Yes, I got my start at Arkane. They decided to give me a chance.
It's a perfect transition from Thief to anything
Thief levels,
yeah, and then Arkane games, which is another immersive sim, basically. And what got you into Thief in the first place? What inspired you to start modding Thief and not some other game? What's so special about Thief, for example, for you?
Well, I remember being, I think, like 11 or 12 years old and playing Ultima Underworld, the first game by Looking Glass Studios. I think they're called Blue Sky Productions at the time. And it just completely redefined to me what a video game was and what it could be, and like what experience someone could have in a video game. And then they just kept following that up with like more and more interesting games. When System Shock came out, I was spending my my time in class with a graph paper and and
wow,
my
yeah.
notebook, sketching out levels for System Shock in my notebook, just completely ignoring what the teacher was saying. But you know, I was doing important work there.
Yeah.
And
I think the world
and-
thanks you for that, for missing that part of history. you know?
Absolutely.
Yes. So then when Thief was coming out, it was like, of course I'm going to play Thief. And I had already made made a website dedicated to Thief before it came out, like a couple of months before it came out. I was working with,
what was the website focused on? Was it the
It
level
was,
design of it, or just the lore?
it was just it was conceptualized as like a hub for the fans of these games. We called it Through the Looking Glass, ttlg.com, and
Nice.
we it was me and a bunch of other folks, and I kind of handled like the web design and the sharing of news stories parts, and other folks handled the community aspects of it. And that went on for a couple of years. And that's how the community gathered around. I was able to put together that petition to get the editor released.
No, it's amazing. Wow.
And then we had like the editor comes out, and there's already like this pretty small but very very ambitious crowd of people who are just ready to dig in and start making maps for Thief. And I spent so many years doing that. Like one map for Thief might take me between 3 and 7 years to complete, and always working with big teams of people. This was a very social hobby of mine, working with people online, tightly knit teams, working together when we could. Like I say 7 years, but I was also doing my architecture degree during that time. So
Your time was preoccupied
Yeah.
as
yes,
well.
yes.
But I think it's fascinating because
I like how you said
I was just-
preoccupied as in like, you know, that thing getting in the way of the actual thing that you want to do.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating because the modding communities back then, like I feel they were so different to how you would get anything now. Because obviously now everyone turns to Unity or Unreal and tries to build something from scratch. But the way I think modern communities for something like Thief, it looks like it is those like diehard fans that just want to expand the world, I guess. Like you want to put your own spin on it and put your own stamp on something you're really passionate about. And I find that stuff kind of really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I remember doing that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was go on. I'm going to continue the story.
No, please continue the story. My story is much more boring.
Yes.
But it was through TTLG that I actually got in touch with a fellow named Rafael Colantonio, who was creating a game with a couple of his friends called Arcs, and he thought the people who were reading my site might be interested in it. And of like my mind was just blown. This was the first time I had seen someone outside of like now this is after Looking Glass had closed, and the torch is being carried by Iron Storm and Irrational. But like this is the first time I'd seen a new studio just come out there and like, okay, we're also going to do games in the style of Looking Glass. We're creating a game in the vein of Ultimate World. I was so excited, and I talked with Raf. I did an interview with him. I posted it on my site, and then a whole nother story happened that I was not aware of until years later. Of like what was the result of that interview. I hope you can get someone on here someday to tell that story, but. I wouldn't know how what that contribution meant until many years later. But I stayed in touch with them, And there was off and on a discussion about me doing level design work with them. They were playing my Thief mods and so forth, and especially the my predecessor, my mentor, Christophe Carrier, who was the campaign director before me and lead level designer before that, was a big champion of my work on the Thief mod. So he was one of the people inside Arkane. Now, like, this is fast forward now to like 2010, when I'm once again trying to join the team. He was one of the people who was saying, yes, take a chance on this person. They have no experience, but her mods are fantastic. And God, like he had no idea how clueless I was, actually. I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm glad it didn't show, and they gave me a chance. And I joined Christophe's team as a level designer. There was no concept at Arkane of like a junior level designer or a senior level designer or anything like that. You're on the team and you're a level designer, period. Of course, the more experienced members of the team will guide and tutor the younger team members, but you get up to speed really fast, and then you have the same responsibilities as everybody else. So that was a really intense first year. I guess it was like 5 or 6 months at Arkane Austin, and then I switched over to Lyon, and we finished up Dishonored. When did we finish that? 2012, I guess it was.
Okay.
It's funny, that feels like such a long production, but it was actually one of my shorter productions. But it's my first time, so like in my memory, it just went on forever. But no, it was actually quite.
Because you're learning, right? When you
Yeah.
learn just so many things, it just becomes overwhelming. You think it's been going on for years, right?
Yes. So
You know
yeah,
what?
that's my origin story.
The origin. I have a shameful admission and to make, that at first I couldn't grok Dishonored. I think it was like the first Dishonored, and then like and then one time I think Dishonored 2 came out, and I started playing it and went like, okay, look, before I start getting into this, let me go back and go through it. And I can't tell you why it was. I think it was like the setting. I've been playing. Look, for my shame, all right, it's my shame, and I have to live with it, which is like Call of Duty or something. And then I went into Dishonored, and it was a kind of like, it was a style thing. It wasn't a gameplay thing. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I think if I look back on my play style, then it was going to be, I think, very chaotic. It would be going along the chaos, because I did not know what I was doing. And then I grokked it, and I was like, oh wow. Then I really enjoyed it. So that's my shame. Well, I'll have to live with it.
My similar admission was, I was kind of in the same boat with the original Deus Ex when that first came out. I also didn't grok it. And I hope, Harvey, I hope you're listening, Harvey.
Same for me too. It was like literally the first level
was so goofy, and all the spaces were so big, and I was used to Thief, and I was used to those very tight encounters, the cool writing, the dense atmosphere. Deus Ex was something totally different, and it took me a couple of years and a couple of tries to get into it. But then, of course, like I was converted.
I think it's sometimes that's one of those things that is someone that's been against something that suddenly turns for it, really goes for it. Do you know what I mean? It's like people that are like, oh yeah, it's great, this is great, everything's great. They don't have that passion of going into it. But you've managed to work on some of the, I just want to talk about the work that you've done. I know that you've covered this endlessly in other places. For example, the Clockwork Mansion, for Dishonored 2 specifically, but you did the Flooded District and a whole bunch of stuff. The Clockwork Mansion for me was one of those things that, and for a lot of people, blew their mind as a level designer. I think I just threw my mouse across the room when I played it. But like, oh, I'm not gonna ever achieve this level of stuff, because it was a while, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to phrase this question, and it's very bad as a host of a podcast, right? Asking the question.
This is
How
your
does
job.
one- yeah, it's my job. I'm just failing at my job. How does one start grokking that in their head when you're building it? Like,
Mm,
do you see what I'm getting at? Because at the end, it's very complex. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things happening, but how do you just come up with like, all right,
That's a starting
very,
yeah,
very, very slowly. um, I made a Twitter thread about this actually,
Oh,
and
okay.
I explained that before any work was done on the Clockwork Mansion that you saw in the game, we spent a year just making prototypes,
Oh wow, okay.
like a whole year. And so sometimes you kind of need to I think the term is fail fast. Like you have to just try something and go with it to see if it doesn't work, so you can change. That it was the opposite of that, the exact opposite of that. It was
Okay.
we're going to spend like basically a year just like in research development mode, and it was just prototype after prototype, all these different versions of it. Versions that were far more extreme than what we shipped, versions that were far more timid than what we shipped. There was like, there's the prototype where it's just a couple of secret doors, and there's a version where like every single piece of floor can move. And then I played Portal 2, and I'm like, okay, that's been done.
Yeah, Portal 2 was a good example, actually.
Yes. But then you do all those prototypes, and then the art team gets involved, and they're the ones that take it to its full potential. So I can be doing my design like on this map specifically. The Clockwork Mansion in particular really depended on the art team to take all of these prototypes, all of these ideas, and be like, okay, we got this, and then they go with it, and then they're working with all of their incredibly talented people. And my level artist on that map was David DiGiacomo, who was like able to join us on that Game Maker's Toolkit episode that we
Right,
did.
I was going to mention that was a beautiful.
If you watch the full
Yeah.
version, he says a lot more. There's a lot more David
Yeah.
in the full version. But yeah,
I'm curious because
yes.
So you said like you obviously it's a very elaborate space. Like if anyone hasn't played it, they all should go and play it and check it out and just see how many moving parts there are to this thing. You spent a year prototyping, and obviously you said it was kind of art was going to make this thing. It is a very elaborate space and stuff. How much of art was involved in the prototyping stages, or was it not until you got to the latter half where you're like, right, how do we make this work in a real architecture sense, sort of thing?
During the prototyping, it was all me. I put some clips up on in that Twitter thread of what the map looked like when I was doing everything. So it's all like these rough, like gray shapes and like gray box gears and all that
level
stuff.
design art. It's fine. That's what we all love here.
Yeah, exactly. But when we started, when it was time to work on the actual map that was going to go into the game, that's when the art team joins. But also, in parallel, they were doing their own prototypes too. So it's not totally true that like they were involved with the prototyping phase too. But during that stage, the attitude was like, I'm going to do my pure vision. They're going to do their pure vision and not be influenced by each other too much. And then there's going to be a moment where you have to meet, and we're going to see where the ideas click together.
It's kind of that point of convergence. Like you've all gone away and done your thing. And I guess the stress for art would have been, how do we do an evolving space that can evolve in so many different ways? And I imagine for artists, that's quite fun than just go and recreate this exact clock tower or something like that. It's like, how do you make this jigsaw Rubik's Cube sort of amalgamation?
Yeah.
So for example, if we did a cinematic trailer for the game, we worked with, I think it was Blur Studio on this, and that trailer was based on the prototypes that were coming out of the art team. So at that time, we're still prototyping the map. Like the map doesn't exist yet. It's all prototypes and ideas and concepts. But the art team, and they're doing their prototypes. So at that point, it was like they just like made a big zip file and tossed it into Blur's lap and be like,
Unfit, just there you go.
do this. I of course it was nothing like that. That was just my imagination.
Yeah.
But like that's a story for like maybe Sébastien Mitton to share about how they collaborated with that studio to create that trailer. But like that, I just mentioned it as an example of like that was the direction the art team was coming from. While I was figuring out like what's the player's goals going to be, what's the layout, what's the flow, what's the sequence of encounters, what is it like to have Jonathon talking to you all the time, what triggers that, what kinds of things does he say?
Right. And those are very subtle things in game design, level design, which are people always think it's a visual side or the walls or the triggers, but it's also like the atmosphere, because you're trying to provide an experience or a journey in a way.
Yeah.
One of the things that always interests me with like, when we like watch these documentary videos and it's like, oh, this level or this section of this game is like so amazing, and we talk about either level design or whatever makes it so amazing, and I'm always wondering like, in the background when you were developing the prototype and whatnot, what was the one main worry that you had that could just break the whole thing? And like, if this thing falls apart, like the whole thing falls apart. Was there something like specific that you were like worrying about? Like, what would that be then?
This was a concern. This was a concern that was not alleviated until very late, and that's could the AIs handle it? That was the biggest concern. Is like there's can the player handle it, and can like the art, the rendering, the physics, can all that handle it? But if the AI can't handle it, then that doesn't work, because this like Dishonored is a game where the interplay between the player and the NPCs is so integral to the experience. And if the AI can't work in this space, then the map doesn't work. And we did not know for sure that the AI was going to work until like almost probably almost alpha, or like sometime during alpha, and finally things were all clicking together. Like we finally had all the tech to make sure that the enemies could navigate the map while it was in configuration A. They could continue to navigate while it was transforming, and then when it was finished transforming, they could navigate the new layout. And it just had to work seamlessly. That was incredible.
I gotta say, when I played that level and I played it a few times, I personally didn't notice any AI bugs. I'm sure there's probably videos on YouTube people find, but it worked like so seamlessly that you don't think about that could have been an issue. Like, because all these things
cutting up the environments, of course.
I was a pain in the neck to so many AI programmers for like a year. There were so many of them who were just sick of seeing me pop up at their desk and be like, I need your help. I need your help.
That's great. Okay.
But together we got it done all together. I think I want to say at least like 4 or 6 AI programmers were needed all together to solve all the problems that we were having.
And this is like,
go ahead.
Is it fair to say it's the most complex mission in Dishonored 2? Like you're talking about the technical overhead and the AI and things like that. It's like, it does sound like it took a lot of tech resources to get this to work like seamlessly, like we just described. Like, but if we look at things in terms of, I guess, effort or intensity, is that the most like resource heavy mission within Dishonored 2? Is that a fair assumption, or is there something we don't realize?
I think there's 3 ways to look at what's the most difficult map. Okay, I'm gonna go with 4 ways to look at what's the most difficult map. So mine might have been more difficult just like purely on a tech level, but like the puzzle design in Crack in the Slab, I think that was much more difficult than what I did, designing all the puzzles and that, making them intuitive, making them satisfying, making it react in ways that that felt correct, and like it didn't betray player agency. It didn't create a situation where you expected one outcome and it gave you something else. It continued to surprise you. That was super hard. Like from like a narrative design standpoint, I think probably a Dust District might have been the toughest one on the map, because suddenly you're dealing with characters. You're not just dealing with NPCs, you're dealing with characters, and they each, like all the different characters want different things, You could have different relationships with them. There was different things you could do to make them respond in different ways, and it all had to make sense, and it all had to be cohesive. It all had to be fun and satisfying. And then we let you skip that map.
Yes, with the puzzle, right?
Wow,
I don't remember the exact puzzle, but I did that puzzle and I skipped the map. I'm sorry. I was like, I'm gonna do this puzzle. I just wanted to figure it out so bad.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I figured it out.
You just bypass everything. It's just,
I replayed it afterwards though.
Okay,
I
right,
played it
right. I was about to say,
Yeah,
get
yeah.
out.
My first playthrough was like, I was just so enticed by that locked door. I needed it to be unlocked. I don't.
And then you locked it and you went through. Oh. But my work on Deathloop has given me new insight to what now I feel like is probably the most difficult thing to do, and that's the beginning of the game. That's the onboarding, the tutorialization. That's teaching the player about what kind of game it is, what are the rules of the game, what is the world, who are the characters, what are the stakes, and the people with that task on Dishonored 2 had a tremendous load to bear, because this was not just a sequel to Dishonored. This was a sequel to Knife of Dunwall and Brigmore Witches, which had far fewer people were even aware of those.
Right.
It had all of this narrative weight that it needed to just like carry. So you're introducing players to what is an immersive sim, and introducing players to like, okay, what is the world of Dishonored? And oh, by the way, this is actually like chapter 4 of a story. So get ready to have like 8 names come at you within the first 30 seconds, and to not know what's going on, and
all the relationships
that was
and
a
everything
tremendous amount
else.
of work. Yes.
I mean, this is something that you see in like problems with Disney when you have that much weight, not the same thing, but that much weight in storyline and world building, right? That you start getting to do nothing. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you did like 5th Dishonored, like not that Arkane could probably pull it off, but it's like you're seeing this with Disney with Star Wars. It's like getting to the point that you can't change the universe. You can't say, and they, you know, and all the Skywalkers were wiped out. You know, it's like, well, no, you can't do that. That's our whole.
that would be the easy option.
Yeah,
That would be the easy
Right,
option.
yeah, because you could start again, right?
I think you can do it. I think Marvel makes it work. I think Marvel
Right.
definitely makes it work. But
I mean,
it's very difficult though.
Yeah.
Yeah, they took 10 years. Like if we look at the original like MCU, it was 10 years of world building, character building, story development. That was a very long time.
I mean,
They managed to stick the landing. Just
and to be
but
fair,
this is like-
there was like 50 or 60 years of comic books that they could rely on. But if you've got like an IP and you're trying to like do it and you're trying to progress it, I mean, I'm not. This is unrelated to obviously Dishonored, and this is why I think sometimes you have to go, okay, now we're moving on to something else. It's lovely to see Arkane going like, yeah, we're the kings of immersive sims, but we're going to do like Prey, and you're like, wait, what? I thought you were going to do the. I have the music of Dishonored in my head right now, but I'm not going to sing it. But do you know what I mean? It's like, we're going to do Prey, and you're like, wait, that's not. But another amazing game, and then of course, you know, Deathloop, which look, I failed to do a description of what Deathloop is. It's in the name, but you know,
nobody can explain Deathloop in like under 30 seconds.
Well, you know, it's handy we've got a podcast that can be as long as you like.
For Deathloop, you started as a campaign director.
I started as a level designer on Deathloop.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then during development, you
Yes.
that changed? Okay.
Yes,
And how was the transition to that, for example? That's a very different role, right?
It was actually surprisingly smooth. So like I jumped into the Deathloop like pre-production team when it was quite small. So like the you know, at the beginning, this game is like kind of the baby of Christophe Carrier and our narrative lead narrative at the time, Saskia Duval, and they've got all these like crazy cool ideas of what this game is. Christoph is the guy who had the idea of like, it's going to be 4 locations 4 times a day. There's going to be a murder puzzle. You have to like find clues and follow leads. So like my first day working on Deathloop, like I'm seeing this diagram that now is like etched into my mind forever of that 4x4 grid with the district names on one
I'm
side.
just
and time of
imagining
day
a
on the
board
other.
with yarn and pictures everywhere now. That's kind of it.
Yes, like dry erase markers, but yes, exactly like that. And Christoph was like, okay, so we're trying to figure out what to do about this guy. He's a scientist. He's like out in the middle of nowhere, and like there's a party going on, and we need the player to do something to get him to the party. So I'm like, okay, this is super cool. I'm really into this. And I immediately just like became so thrilled with the idea of working on these puzzles that just crossed the entire game. So multiple levels involved, multiple locations, and you had to like do all these steps and play with time. You had to do this now, and then you had to do this earlier, then you had to go back there. So it was almost a disappointment when I had to go back to doing level design at that point, because like, okay, we're going to make the prototype, we're going to do the vertical slice. It's going to be the up-down district. Dana, how about you do the level design for Alexis Dorsey's mansion? And like, yeah, cool. That seems great. I designed it basically like a thief map, like I always do.
You started
You
with thief.
heard it here first. Alexis Dorsey's mansion is a thief map.
Yeah.
You're still using the same modding tools from
It's the exact same
2008.
map, actually.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, but what I mean is like I use the exact same like design ethic that I would use to design a thief map to design this place. The way I approach the process of first envisioning it as a real place. How would this place function as an actual location? And like filling out the hierarchy of needs. Like first hierarchy is, this is the home of a rich asshole. Second hierarchy is, an awesome party has to be happening here. And the third one is, God, what was the third one? Probably just like the whole aspect of you having to infiltrate. And so like the player's experience is like the third tier on that list. Because it has to be credible, first and foremost. Right. It has to be believable that like this is a place that's serving this function. So I worked on that for like the duration of the pre-prod time, finished up the vertical slice. And then continued on doing level design for that map for maybe another year of production. And during that time, I'm still so fascinated by the murder puzzle. And I'm sure, you know, and like I was doing with the AI programmers during Clockwork Mansion, I was always at like a Toff's desk or Dinga's desk or Sasha's desk. And I'm like, what if we did this? What if we did that? Like, or like, I see a problem here. I think we should solve this. Like, this doesn't quite make sense. What if we did that? Like, wouldn't it be cool if Wenji had her own lead? Wouldn't it be cool if Wenji had a lead? So to make a long story short, Christoph eventually moved on to the studio. I believe he's actually, I'm not going to like goof up and say the wrong thing. I'm pretty sure I know where he is, but I don't want to misspeak. But I know he's still in the industry doing work. I'm pretty sure he's with Wolf-Eye working on Weird West. I'm not sure.
We'll edit as appropriate, so you can say a whole range of names. We'll just put them in.
Like, we'll
put the right one in.
Yes, I could be confusing him. We also had our lead level designer at that time, Joaquin Davio, who was again like a great mentor to me and helped me so much making Clockwork Mansion and Alexis Dorsey's and all that stuff. I know for sure that he's at Wolf-Eye working on Weird West. But anyway, I was always at their desks, like saying, we've got to push these. We have to push the murder puzzle farther. We have to do this. Wouldn't it be cool if that happened? So like, it's almost like a custom at Arkane. If you care too much about something, then it officially becomes your job. Like if you're being too much of a pain in the neck about a certain topic, it's like, okay, now you are the like the person responsible for this thing that you won't shut up about.
Yeah, please make them shut up. So just give them the like content to work.
Your responsibility now.
In a strange way, it sounds like a very French way of doing it. Like, well, if you care so much about it, you do it.
Yeah. No, of course, the actual process wasn't that silly.
No, of course.
We're just making fun.
Yeah.
That was the build-up to get into
yeah.
the official process.
Right.
I believe it was Dinga Bakaba who first recommended that I take over that job officially. So I started off as a campaign designer, as a member of the level design team. Like I'm still a member of the level design team, to be clear. But I was working. At first, it was going to be mostly focused on working with all the level designers on the design of the murder puzzle. But as time went on, this became more and more of a collaboration with narrative and more a collaboration with the user experience designers. And that was the big surprise. And that was the big moment where I realized that I had to like I had so much more to learn, because I'm not just a level designer anymore. I'm a UX designer, just like by I don't want to say by default, but just like out of necessity, because we had so much work to do. Like I was explaining before, I now understand how difficult it is to design in the beginning of the game. One of my biggest responsibilities on Deathloop wasn't necessarily like continuing on the design of the murder puzzle that I was so excited to work on, but we have to design an introductory chapter to the game now. We were seeing the user research reports, and people were just lost. People just didn't know what to do. They would finish the tutorial. The tutorial map was great, no problems there. They were excited. We dumped them into the game world, and they were just like, now what? Now what do I do? So we took about, I don't know how long we worked on this thing, but there was this big effort to create a new introductory chapter to the game. And now I'm doing a GDC talk about that.
Wow. Oh, amazing.
That's incredible.
I mean,
that's the talk I'm working on right now. I do, I think it's like 45 minutes plus Q&A at the end of me like walking the audience through the process of how we designed the opening chapter of Deathloop, and how after we designed the opening chapter of Deathloop, we realized that the entire rest of the structure of the entire game had to be changed.
Oh, wow.
Because even I'm spoiling what the GDC talk is going to be, though I won't give too much away, but
no, go and see the GDC talk, right? This is how we sell tickets to GDC. We'll put a link to our voucher code.
I'm a GDC advisor, to be clear. Like I'm on the staff. I'm not just shilling for them for no reason.
I am hoping to make it this year, because I was about to go in 20.
I will be attending virtually. I'm not going in person.
Okay.
But right. So I realized that it wasn't enough to introduce the player into the world. Like the whole way the world worked kind of needed to change to be to connect better to what the player was seeing and experiencing. There's the version of the game that existed at one point, which is, I know the version that so many people would have wanted to play, where like the game just doesn't help you at all.
Yeah, there's no hand holding, there's no tutorial version of it
at all. Like you are on your own, and it became my job at one point to solve that. Like I was very much in love with that original version. I'm the kind of a designer and player who likes to give the player that type of mysterious challenge. But also we wanted people to enjoy the game.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's such a fine balance
to understand it all.
There's such a fine...
And you can still toggle the markers off. That's still possible.
Right. Okay.
So you can still experience the game during that early version of the design. But
Right.
Yes.
There's a point, isn't there, at which you realize that designing puzzles is relatively easy in terms of in level design. But when you've got to try and explain something instead, that's when it gets really, really tough. And that's when you
Yeah.
start having to really flex those muscles to use all the tricks you have at your disposal to show the player what's going on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, how
I
do you
agree.
think you've developed those skills, Dana? I mean, from when you started in thief map development, you were working in a world that everyone knew and everyone was mostly enthusiastic about if they were downloading fan
Yes.
levels. So you had this kind of
Yes.
shared understanding of things. But how do you think you've developed over your career in terms of that expertise to move from being almost a sort of outsider to an insider and back to an outsider again?
It's really hard to explain. I know that you gave the example of the thief crowd, and in that case, you have a very specific audience, and you know them very well, and you know exactly what they want, and you can serve that audience. But that wasn't going to happen with Deathloop. It was a totally new thing. We knew it was going to attract a much different audience than even the Dishonored games. So we were kind of starting over from scratch, and I think the two things I had to remember, one easy and one hard. The easy one is just trust your testers, trust the people in QA. If they're saying something isn't working, trust them. Trust the people at user research. If they tell you this is happening, believe them. Trust all the different people that are coming in to give advice and input. Don't panic. Don't have like a knee-jerk reaction. Don't take take a sword out and start slashing it up and being like, nothing works, because that leads into what the second part is, which is much harder, is to understand that the part of the game the players are saying is the problem isn't necessarily the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And just to give a quick example of that, early on we were seeing that players were like tackling this requires some knowledge of Deathloop to make sense, but players were tackling Frank's Casino like immediately after at the end of the guided tour. So the game finishes his introduction and all the players were going straight to Frank's Casino and just dying over and over and over and over and over, and they were rage quitting. And like the feedback was, Frank's Casino is too hard.
Yeah.
It's difficult. This is one of the most difficult stages in the game, and the wrong move there. And this isn't necessarily my insights. This is insights from like Dinga and our lead level designer Leon Sake and everyone being like, no, the map works as designed. The design is good. The problem is, why are players going directly to Frank's Casino? Like, what's going on there?
Like that shouldn't be first, sort of thing. It's like the player shouldn't be led here after the tutorial.
Yeah. And Well, we looked at the way the campaign was structured, and very soon it was quite obvious. It's like, oh yeah, that's one of the first hints we give you, because like you see the fireworks display and you get the clue that, oh, Frank sends up fireworks. Maybe I can do something about that. So you immediately start off with this clue about Frank. The UI is arranged so that Frank's map is like front and center. He's at the top of the list of the leads. So there's all this stuff telling the player, start with Frank. And none of that was actually necessary to do. We could like go, actually, no, let's move you over here. And like actually go after Harriet first, or go after Igor first. Those are much easier experiences. And the problem went away. And we didn't have to like lower the difficulty of this map, which we were all very proud of. Yeah, like the level designer of that map, Tristan Pluchot, he did work that we were all proud of, and we were not ready to go in there with just like a pair of scissors and be like, cut this, cut that, reduce the number of enemies here, take out that turret, or like make the section easier.
Weaken that whole area, right? You're not gonna do that. This
is a really cool stage for the player to experience at like hour 5. not hour 2.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
One of
One-
the best things actually that you mentioned that like I've been just like dying also to hear from other people like how the feedback works. That the first one is like you have to listen to everybody, but the second one is like they probably don't know where the problem is. They'll tell you, oh my god, this combat is so difficult, but maybe something they did beforehand did that, and that's the problem. And it's like this like there's such a pressure to this kind of like receiving feedback and listening to feedback, because you're like, you might feel like, oh my god, I'm doing my job wrong, or what is wrong here, but then you kind of have to like, wait, they're telling me this, but it could be an easy fix by just arranging the UI, and then suddenly boom, it's like fixed in that way. And that's amazing. It's like that these little design choices that we don't get to hear often, and that's, I think that's really important for game development, like this sort of feedback loop.
That those insights are the superpower of the user research analysts.
Right. But also the solutions there is something that reminds me of, there was a hypnotist shaman called Darren Brown who did tricks, and I equate a lot of, because he then shows you how a lot of this stuff is done, reminds me of game and level design, because one of his tricks was someone came to the audience, they showed you the end, that they arrived, and he said, I want you to tell me a number, and he said like number 9 as an example. I can't remember the trick, but what he says, like the reason he said that was because all the way from this person leaving their house to them arriving here, I sent them a cab. In that cab, there's a number 9 inside the cab. People have been walking down the street. I set up the whole environment so that they'll be seeing the number 9 1,000 times. So that's the only number that's going to be in their head. So
like planting the seeds, like
planting the seeds,
like,
right?
yeah.
And this is what kind of like game design reminds me of, is that like you have to be planting the seeds. And if you planted the seed of going to the casino, well, the player will follow. But don't
You're
tell them
planting
that.
seeds.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's impressive to see the fix. It was good. You mentioned like the knee-jerk reaction, if you're a little bit maybe less experienced or not adverse to it, is to go the chaotic approach, right? And start cutting up or breaking up the content. You're just like, this is terrible. But like, yeah, it's all about taking that feedback on board, let's say from your feedback loop, and honing in on the problem instead of just having the knee-jerk reaction to go, this is all wrong, this is terrible. And like I've seen designers do this, and it's not fun to watch, because sometimes you can't talk them out of it. It's like, no, just like really think about it. And like they're so set in the ways, no, everyone says it's terrible, but if you can get them to really think about it, they kind of see the bigger picture. And like even that can be a challenge itself, because if it's not your work, it's sometimes hard to get someone else to see that in themselves.
Speaking of testing, I actually was wondering how difficult it must have been to just test Deathloop design-wise, not like QA bugs and stuff. Like, so you have the whole flow, and you can play it in so many different ways, even though you can't see it. And obviously, as a designer, you also play the game often. Like, what were like the main
excuse me,
issues that were popping up? Like, for example, you could have like, you could play a specific area continuously, so that might become repetitive, or I don't know, like what kind of like issues were popping up design wise with the flow that you were finding?
I actually, this came up. I sometimes do Twitch streams where I play Deathloop and talk about the design. And this came up last stream, and I mentioned an issue that excuse me, got some kind of animal in my throat. I think it's a frog or a cat.
It's okay.
There's I think I'm all right.
Very good.
And this is an issue that we actually we shipped with because we couldn't fix it. And it's possible to get Igor to the party without ever knowing that he was interested in going to the party. So when you get there, the lead is complete, but because you didn't have the knowledge that Igor wants to go to the party, the lead doesn't resolve. So you technically have done everything you need, and that's not good. That's a problem. The game should respect that. And honestly, I don't remember what version of there's some form of fix in there in the end. this was very, very late in beta when we're trying to solve this. I think this is like, trying to get certification or something. This is like the 11th hour, like the 59th minute where this issue comes up, and we're just going back and forth with the QA folks on this, trying to find a satisfactory solution. Like I give my input, the level designer would have their input, QA would have their input, but it was kind of like a no-win situation at that point, because what we would have needed was the plot to branch a little bit there. For there had to have been like a custom outcome for that, for the information to adapt to that situation, so the player was then led back to the original clue and everything would be tied in a bow. But we didn't have the ability to make those kinds of changes, because at that late you make one change to one piece of text and then it has to be sent to like 8 localization offices all around the world and
re-recorded. And
like maybe no re-recording at that stage,
Right.
but still even the text changes were really expensive and like really time consuming to do. So we just had to say, okay, we didn't win on this one. This one's on us. But all through development, like little holes were being discovered. Like that, like if you do the lead in this order, it doesn't make sense. It's happening all over the place.
I'm just going to say that the complexity of the games that you guys build, if that's a problem, well, everybody else in the world, back off, right? Like, come on. What is?
I've never heard a player complain about it.
Okay, great. I think that's like, hey, I found I found behind the curtains. I think it's a challenge complete. So we've been saying lovely things about Arkane, but have you been playing anything that you go like, oh, that's the way we're looking at you going like, that's so good? Is there anything that you've been playing that goes like, that's amazing?
I finally dug into the expansion for Outer Wilds, and Outer Wilds is like, if not in my top 5, top 10 like favorite games of all time. It's just the mastery of the craft on display in that game is just staggering. So of course I was delighted to jump into that. But that's one of the games that you can't talk about because you want everyone to experience it for themselves. And you can't spoil it. So like I can't even explain why it's so incredible. But just the dynamicism.
We can put like a spoiler warning. Like I'll come in later on and tell you when the timestamp for you to skip ahead.
But every now and then I like to play a game that it feels very much like this is a game by level designers for level designers, and I played one of those over the break. It's I think it's a Source Engine indie game called Infra. I think it's made in Finland. And this is like a 30-hour long game. It's basically Half-Life 2 with no combat and missed puzzles.
Right.
And it like this game is just pure level design from start to finish. And I'm playing through this, and it's a mix of like being really depressed and not depressed, impressed.
That's a big difference.
Very different end of the spectrum.
Well, some of the desolation is a bit depressing at times. Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. There's a lot of desolation in that game. It's a mix of being very impressed and a lot of places where it's like, oh, I would have loved to sit down with this level designer and give them feedback and be like, if you had just moved this here, just turn the doorway that way, like adjusted the way the player enters the room, like take this thing that's critical and just move it like 1 meter to the right, then this section would have just been singing. But
I don't know if it was sorry, go on.
Well, the game is just, it's 30 hours long, so it's so much content. Yeah. So there's just so many, like, it's just idea after idea after idea after idea. So a really impressive amount of work they put into that.
I super enjoyed it. I don't know if it's the sort of Source Engine aesthetics or the complete lack of NPCs that you can beat, but it felt to me almost like walking through an empty Counter-Strike server. where you're just wandering around, and
Yeah.
suddenly the maps are all working, and like D Prodigy, you can use the machines and you can figure out what's happened to all these weird empty
Yes.
Counter-Strike maps. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Speaking of games, you play like Outer Wilds and Infra now, and are those the kind of games that sorry inspire you for designing, like when you work on games? Because you're working in a specific company that makes very specific games, immersive sims, and there's, I don't even know other big companies that make that. So you say you were working on Call of Duty, you could maybe get inspiration from other games that are similar first-person shooters. But when you're working on immersive sims, you've got obviously your Thieves and your Deus Ex. What kind of games inspire you for your work?
I it feels like kind of a cliche answer, but of course you can find inspiration anywhere.
Yeah.
For my work on Deathloop, as a campaign designer, I had to turn my eye more to like sprawling RPGs or something like another amazing game, Disco Elysium,
Oh, wow.
where you have all of these quest lines happening all at the same time. And like, how do you deal with the cognitive load of having all of these different things pulling at your attention, and the player having to be able to parse all that and be like, this is what I want to do. And I think one of the most difficult and important things to achieve is to create a game where the player can make that statement, because that means the game is giving them options. The player understands those options. The player has identified which one of those options right now is the one that they're most interested in. So that could, like, I can get inspiration for that from Disco Elysium or Breath of the Wild or any other like big open-ended game, but a game where all of those options are meaningful. You're not just like going down a list from start to finish of like, well, these are my tasks in the area, so I'm going to tick all these boxes. It's more like, this is an open-ended world. I can do what I want. What do I want to do? And that was what I needed to look at and examine for inspiration, working on Deathloop.
Dana, I think
I spent like a year playing Skyrim while working on Deathloop too. That's a game that's like 100% that vibe is Skyrim.
I don't think I ever finished Skyrim. I just did all the side quests, and then bounced out. So
you're done with Skyrim when you're done with it. That's still finished.
yeah, exactly.
I think that's valid. Dana, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I think we should do another recording, have you back on and talk about the next game or the previous games in more detail, anything, or just have you on for no reason at all than having you on, because you've been awesome.
You're all very fun to talk to, so I would be happy to.
Where can people catch you? Is Twitter the best way to? We're going to put a link to that.
Twitter, yeah. Twitter's the best way, and that's where you can
is
find.
A really good place.
No.
Don't.
No LinkedIn.
No LinkedIn.
No.
Jesus Christ.
Twitter is where you can find the thread that I mentioned about the Clockwork Mansion, where I share the early videos and so forth.
And of course, GDC in March.
Yes,
in March
GDC in March. Yes,
and
I've
of course,
got my talk, and there's one more unannounced thing that I'm waiting for to be announced, and I'm really excited about it. Like, I'm checking the GDC site every day. It's like, have they announced it yet? Have they announced it yet? Come on, announce it, please.
So by the time this is out, it will be announced, so we can put it in the link.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you're still going to be listening to the podcast. Still not announced. And
Refreshing,
of course,
again and again.
People can go on a time loop and go back to develop and watch your talk on the level design and studio wide effort, which was a great talk. I was there.
That was a very difficult talk to put together. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That was a very hard talk to make.
It was very eye-widening. You know.
No, it's your turn.
Sad moments in that. Some sad moments in that talk, I guess.
No. I mean, and it really fit with what I said at the beginning, that this is, this podcast is a look at the world of game development through the lens of level design, right? And your talk did kind of show you like how the whole studio is involved, you know, in level design. So it's like, yes, point proved. I am vindicated. And on
Well,
that
they've
note,
been GDC has been putting their talks up on YouTube, so I hope that one will be. But I did the talk at Game Camp,
okay.
and that's on YouTube. Yeah, I have a link
Oh,
for that.
okay. I should
can
watch
share
it
that link
because
with
I
you.
definitely didn't
Yeah,
hear
that-
about it until now. Okay.
That's the 40-minute version of the talk. At GDC, I gave a 60-minute version of it. So that's the one. Like you haven't seen the full version of that talk, Mark.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm
I had to cut like.
It's
15,
the
20 minutes
director's
out of it.
version will be released another time with those 20 extra minutes.
Yes.
the director's cut. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for joining us.
Thank you
come
for
back
having me.
next time. And
I
see you
sure
soon.
will. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Level Design Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter via @LevelDesignFM or email us at show@leveldesign.fm. Our hosts are Mark Drew, Jonathon Wilson, Valentina Chrysostomou, and Rob McLachlan. Editing was by Matthew Lever, and the production was by Anna Tumurova. Our theme tune is by the awesome James Elsey. This has been a Command Studios production.